The moment the world went silent, I felt both terrified and liberated. One second, I was standing in the middle of a crowded auditorium, adjusting the live podcast microphones for Rob's keynote seminar, and the next, a sharp pop from the audio console left me deafened, my ears ringing with the faintest, distant hum of electronics. Panic clawed at me at first, but then an unexpected calm took over. In the void, with no external sound, I became intensely aware of myself, my thoughts, my feelings, the weight of all the compromises I had made to keep Rob's brand intact. It wasn't just the technical work that had defined me, it was the way I had allowed myself to be erased in the process. Every seminar, every retreat, every carefully staged social media post had been curated to make Rob look brilliant, empathetic, and trustworthy. And I had done it all. I had engineered his success, while quietly silencing my own ambitions. In that silence, the truth hit me like a wave. I had been complicit in a life that was not my own, a life designed to make someone else shine while I faded into the background. Being cut off from sound forced me to confront what I had ignored for years. I could no longer rely on the noise of the world to distract me. There was no buzz of applause, no chatter of colleagues, no comforting ambient sounds of the studio. There was only me. And in that solitude, I saw clearly. I had been living for approval, for stability, and for a version of love that was more performative than real. When the doctors told me my hearing might come back, I didn't feel relief, at least not at first. The prospect of returning to a world where dishonesty could once again be hidden behind laughter and polite conversation made me anxious. But I also knew that this temporary silence had given me a gift: clarity. And clarity is terrifying, especially when it comes to realizing someone you trusted is not who they appear to be. I spent hours lying in the hospital bed, replaying the seminars and interactions in my head, trying to remember every moment where Rob had subtly manipulated situations in his favor. The more I thought, the more patterns emerged. The micro-expressions, the slight changes in tone when discussing clients, even the way he spoke about me in casual conversations when he assumed I wasn't listening, all of it painted a picture I couldn't ignore. When my hearing gradually returned, it wasn't simply restored. It was enhanced, heightened. Every sound was sharper, more distinct. I could pick up nuances in conversations that others would miss. The tap of someone's pen, the barely audible intake of breath before a lie, the almost imperceptible hesitation before a forced compliment. It was all there, all amplified. I realized that sound wasn't just background noise. It was a weapon, a tool, and a truth serum. I left the hospital with a new sense of purpose. I knew I had to confront the reality of Rob's duplicity. But more importantly, I understood that this confrontation wasn't just about him. It was about me, my integrity, and reclaiming the part of my life I had allowed to be stolen under the guise of loyalty. For the first time, I wasn't just hearing, I was listening. And I intended to use what I heard to finally stand fully awake in a world that had spent too long trying to keep me silent. The day of the incident still lives in my mind like a room filled with mirrors, every angle reflecting a different fragment of the moment when my old life collapsed. I remember standing backstage during Rob's live podcast event, the usual cocktail of adrenaline and routine humming through my veins. I'd run hundreds of shows, managed thousands of cues, synchronized speeches, sound effects, audience engagement triggers. It was a world I understood intimately, structured, predictable, technical, safe. Until it wasn't. The malfunction started as a faint pop. Nothing unusual. Equipment hiccups, feedback flares, loose cables. They're the background noise of production. But then came the sudden, violent eruption of static, as if lightning itself had struck inside my headset. A brutal blast, sharp, metallic, impossibly loud, surged through my ears. I didn't even have time to cry out. The world simply vanished into silence. A silence that felt like death. I remember opening my mouth, touching my ears, trying to swallow the panic pushing at my throat. The audience was still cheering, but I saw it rather than heard it. Their clapping looked like frantic fluttering wings, distant and disconnected, as if I were underwater watching life happen on the surface. Everything became slow and surreal. The crew running toward me, my fingertips brushing the swollen warmth around my ears, the way my heartbeat filled the emptiness where sound was supposed to be. Someone helped me sit. Someone else called the medics. Rob didn't even glance backstage. He was too busy basking in the applause of a crowd he routinely manipulated for profit. Later, in the hospital, the doctors assured me the damage was temporary. Temporary. I clung to the word the way a drowning person clings to driftwood. For 3 days, I existed inside a muted world where every thought felt too loud and every memory too sharp. Without the constant noise of work, responsibility, and Rob's endless demands, I was forced to hear myself, my fears, my hopes, my exhaustion, all echoing in the hollow space where sound once lived. And then, just as unexpectedly as it vanished, my hearing returned. But not as it had been. Sounds didn't simply come back, they arrived with a kind of clarity that felt supernatural. I could hear the subtle fluctuations in people's voices, the tremors behind their words, the micro-hesitations that revealed what they really felt. It wasn't mystical, it was hypersensitivity. But the result was uncanny. Dishonesty had a sound. False reassurance vibrated like a detuned string. Lies hummed with a metallic sharpness, like the edge of a knife grazing glass. Rob visited me once during recovery, carrying a bouquet that looked like it had been purchased in a hurry. His smile was polished, practiced. The same expression he used for staged videos about gratitude and authenticity. When he said, "I'm so glad you're okay, Aisha," the falseness in his tone hit me like another burst of static. Sharp, cold, hollow. The old me would have ignored it, explained it away, smoothed the edges for him. But after the silence, after the rebirth, I felt something shift inside me. I couldn't unhear the truth embedded in people's voices. I couldn't ignore the dissonance anymore. When he hugged me, I heard the faint buzz of irritation in his throat, like I was an inconvenience disrupting his schedule. When he talked about the brand vision and getting back to work, the dishonesty clung to each syllable. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But the seed of suspicion, once planted, doesn't stay quiet. It grows roots. It cracks the concrete of denial you've been living on. And soon, every sound around me began revealing fractures I'd never noticed before. Especially the faulty microphone pack Rob kept complaining about. The one that turned itself on. The one he said was possessed or glitching. The one that would soon show me everything. The first week I returned to work, everything sounded wrong. Not broken. Not distorted. Just wrong. Like the world had been tuned to a frequency that revealed every fracture beneath the surface. People's greetings rang too bright, their laughter too thin, their reassurances carrying a faint metallic buzz I now associated with dishonesty. I learned quickly that most people lied far more than they realized. Tiny lies, harmless lies, self-preserving lies. But they all had a sound. Sharp, jittery, grating. Rob's lies were the worst. Every time he said he was busy, or focused, or working with clients, the edges of his voice shimmered with falseness. I told myself it was just my hypersensitivity, that maybe I was imagining things. But the static-like undertone never left. It followed him like a faulty wire sparking in the dark. Then the microphone pack started acting up again. He stormed into the studio, holding it like an accusation. "This thing keeps turning itself on. You need to fix it. It's embarrassing." His irritation wasn't new, but the bitterness in his tone had deepened lately, as though my recovery had been an inconvenience he resented. The sharpness in his voice almost hurt physically now, a sensation like needles tapping my eardrums. Still, I took the mic pack from him quietly. Still, I told myself, "Dear job, don't jump to conclusions. Don't assume the worst." But suspicion is a living thing. Once awake, it refuses to sleep. Late that evening, long after the interns had gone home and the building had settled into its nighttime hum, I sat alone in the control room. Soft blue LED lights glowed from the consoles, washing the equipment in a calm, underwater-like haze. I placed the problematic mic pack on the desk in front of me. The simple black device looked harmless enough, like a small rectangular witness that had been desperately trying to speak. With a deep breath, I plugged it into my console. A faint tremor of anticipation passed through me, the same cold quivering feeling you get before opening a door you're not sure you want to peek behind. I pressed play. The beginning of the recording was predictable, applause fading, a few muffled footsteps, the rustle of Rob taking off his jacket. The end of his previous seminar. Nothing unusual. Then there was a pause. A long one. Almost silent, except for the faint, ambient hum of the venue. And then his voice, unguarded, stripped of performance, slipped through the speakers. God, I hate that sincerity script. My blood chilled. I leaned forward instinctively, as if proximity would sharpen the sound. His tone wasn't joking. It wasn't tired. It was drenched in contempt. I felt the edges of his falseness like a vibration through my bones. Another voice entered.
Light.
Playful. Familiar.
Chloe.
Don't worry, Robbie, she said with a low laugh. You're brilliant at faking it. I felt my stomach drop. Even before the rest played, the buzzing in my ears, my strange new instinct, screamed at me. This is the truth you weren't supposed to hear. Rob sighed, an intimate, exhausted sigh he had never once used with me. Now, Chloe continued, about that Caribbean retreat you promised us.
Us.
The conversation spilled out slowly, casual, practiced, almost mundane in how deeply it cut. They weren't talking about love. They weren't even talking about betrayal in the romantic sense. What made my chest tighten was the revelation of cruelty. They mocked the authentic storytelling that made Rob famous. They rehearsed manipulation strategies like actors prepping for a play. They discussed future seminars as if audiences were sheep waiting to be fleeced. And then came the line that nearly knocked the breath out of me. She buys the whole higher purpose thing, Rob said, amused. Aisha's got that boring, technical mind. Perfect for fixing problems while I sell the dream. Chloe laughed. You're lucky she's loyal. A woman like that will run your empire while you enjoy the perks. They weren't discussing an affair. They were discussing me, my usefulness, my naive loyalty, my role as a tool. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. The betrayal didn't roar inside me. It settled, heavy and cold, like snow sealing a grave. For a long moment, I sat motionless, staring at the dim-lit console as their voices slowly faded. My hands trembled slightly, not from grief, but from something far more dangerous.
Clarity.
This moment was my real rebirth. Not the silence. Not the hypersensitivity. This truth. This unveiling. And in that clarity, I understood something profoundly simple. Rob wasn't a visionary. He wasn't even a villain with complexity. He was hollow, performative, and deeply predictable. But I was not. And for the first time since the accident, since the static, since the silence, I felt a new sound inside me, a quiet, steady resolve, humming like a heartbeat. I reached for my phone. Because there was one person whose voice had never rung false in my ears. One person who valued substance over spectacle. One person whose integrity was known across the industry. Leo. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I sat in the dark studio long after the audio ended. The building was silent around me, yet my ears buzzed with the aftershocks of truth. Betrayal has a sound, one I could now recognize instantly. Rob's voice still echoed faintly in my mind, coated in that thin metallic hum of manipulation I'd been sensing for weeks. Chloe's laughter lingered too, airy and self-satisfied. The recording hadn't created my heartbreak. It had only confirmed something my reborn senses had been warning me about. What surprised me wasn't the pain. It was the calm. I expected the kind of heartbreak that collapses you. The kind that wrings sobs from your chest or leaves you trembling. But instead, my emotions arranged themselves into something still and cold, like water turning to ice overnight. I wasn't shattered. I was crystallized. And in that clarity, a direction emerged almost immediately.
Leo.
The thought of him felt like steady ground, not because he was heroic or perfect, but because he had always been consistent. Honest. Irritatingly blunt sometimes, but never insincere. I'd worked alongside him a few years earlier during a joint industry panel. Back then, He was known for his no-nonsense critiques and for refusing sponsorships that didn't align with his values. He and Rob were opposites in every meaningful way, two competing titans of a growing industry, one built on substance, the other on spectacle. I hadn't spoken to Leo in months, but instinctively I knew he'd answer. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as I unlocked my phone. For a moment, I just held it, letting the smooth weight anchor me. My heart beat steadily, not fast, not shaken, just present. The old me would have hesitated. She would have agonized over whether reaching out was too dramatic or unprofessional. But the new me, the broken, rebuilt version, no longer feared consequences the way she once did. I dialed his number. The ringing felt louder than usual, every tone vibrating with my heightened senses. On the third ring, his voice came through, low, grounded, unmistakably genuine. Aisha. The way he said my name, curious but steady, nearly undid the icy shell around my chest. Not because it was tender, but because it lacked the falseness I'd grown used to hearing. It's late, he continued, voice edged with concern. Are you okay? I swallowed. I need your help. Those 5 words tasted strange in my mouth. Humbling.
Exposed.
But Leo didn't question me, didn't analyze the drama behind my tone. Instead, he exhaled slowly, as if preparing to carry something heavy on my behalf. I'm listening. That simple phrase, far more than a recording, signaled the first shift in my life's axis. I told him everything. Not with the jagged urgency of someone breaking down, but with the calm precision of a technician diagnosing a failure. I described the malfunctioning mic pack, the playback, the voices, the confession, the manipulation. As I spoke, my hearing sharpened to every nuance in Leo's breathing, every shift in his silence. He didn't interrupt. He didn't gasp or swear. He didn't tell me to calm down. He just listened, with a focus so complete it felt like a warm hand steadying me through the phone. When I finished, there was a long pause. Not a hesitant one. Not a disbelieving one. A working pause, as if he was mentally assembling the next steps like a craftsman examining a blueprint. Do you still have the file? He asked.
Yes.
Unedited. Good. His voice deepened with purpose. You did the right thing calling me. Strangely, that validation loosened something tight inside me. For so long, Rob had treated my instincts like inconveniences, tedious technicalities that he didn't have the emotional bandwidth for.
But Leo?
He treated them like strengths. Listen, he said, this isn't just an affair. This is fraud, manipulation, brand deception on a massive scale. This audio, it's going to shake the industry. The weight of that truth hovered between us. Are you prepared for what comes next? I thought of Rob's voice mocking sincerity. I thought of Chloe calling my mind boring. I thought of every time I'd stayed silent to keep the peace. Yes, I said softly. I'm ready. Another pause, shorter, charged. All right, Leo said. Send me the file. I'll meet you in the morning. We'll do this right. There was no hesitation. No doubt. Just resolve. Before hanging up, his tone shifted, not warmer, but more personal, stripped of the competitor's veneer. Aisha, you deserve better than what he did to you. And we're going to make sure he never does it to anyone else again. After the call ended, I sat in the studio and looked around at the equipment I'd spent years mastering. This room had always been a sanctuary, a place where sound made sense. Tonight, it became something else, a battlefield command center. A place where the truth finally found its voice. For the first time since the accident, I felt not fragile but powerful. The old Aisha would have suffered in silence. The new Aisha, reborn through absence, sharpened by sound, was done being the quiet foundation of someone else's lie. And tomorrow, with Leo's help, the world would hear everything. Morning came too fast. I barely slept, but not from anxiety. It was something else, an alertness under my skin, a sense of waiting, like the air just before a thunderstorm. My heightened hearing made every tiny sound sharp, the soft rustle of fabric when I dressed, the faint hum of my refrigerator, even my own heartbeat tapping steadily in my ears. It didn't overwhelm me this time. It focused me. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day everything broke open. At exactly 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Leo. I'm outside.
Of course he was precisely on time.
Leo didn't do unpredictability. I stepped out of my building and found him leaning against his car, a cup of coffee in one hand and an expression that looked like a combination of calculation and quiet fury. A fury that wasn't directed at me, but at what had been done to me. To integrity.
To truth.
Ready? He asked simply. I nodded, sliding into the passenger seat. We didn't need pleasantries. Something deeper had already formed between us, an unspoken alignment, a shared devotion to precision and justice. He handed me the coffee. 2 sugars, no cream. I stared at it. How did you? You always ordered it at conferences. I didn't realize he'd paid attention. The drive was calm but electric. We weren't heading to a legal office or a PR agency. Instead, Leo drove us to a private studio he occasionally rented for his long-form episodes. Simple, soundproof, no unnecessary tech. A room built for truth, not theatrics. The moment we stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. It felt like stepping onto a battlefield we had prepared, mapped, fortified. Leo set his laptop on the desk and opened the project he had begun overnight. I leaned in, letting my senses adjust to the soft whir of the fans and the gentle click of his keyboard. He worked with the efficiency of someone who respected the weight of what he carried. I isolated the key parts, he explained, dragging waveform segments across the screen. You can hear the shift in tone, the manipulation, the mocking. It's damning. He wasn't exaggerating. Hearing it again, in this room designed for clarity, the truth hit harder. Now, he continued, we build context. You explain neutrally how you found the recording. No accusations. Just facts. Let the audience draw conclusions. He wasn't using me as a weapon. He was using the truth. Equal parts ruthless and principled. A paradox I found strangely grounding. We recorded my parts first. My voice trembled slightly at the beginning, but Leo lifted a hand, a subtle signal to breathe. And somehow that was enough. My second take was clean, steady, and painfully honest. Then came the hard part, assembling everything into a single, cohesive narrative. The audio was devastating. Rob's voice dripping disdain. God, I hate that sincerity script. Chloe laughing softly. Don't worry, Robbie. You're brilliant at faking it. Then their casual cruelty toward me. Aisha's mind is useful, but so boring. Hearing it laid bare, not buried in noise, not distorted, felt like watching a wound being lanced. Painful, but necessary.
Purifying.
When the final cut was done, Leo sat back, assessing it with a professional's gaze. This is airtight, he said quietly. They can deny the affair. They can spin the relationship. But they can't explain this away. I felt something settle inside me. Acceptance, maybe. Resolve. He uploaded the exposé through an anonymous channel, using a secure network path that even Rob's aggressive legal team wouldn't trace back to me. Then he sat back, folding his arms, eyes never leaving the screen. Now, he said, we watch. The first few minutes were quiet. 100 views. 200. Comments trickling in, confused, skeptical. But then the algorithm caught the engagement spike. Forums started linking to it. A small creator reacted to it live. A critic dissected the audio line by line. Then momentum. Real, unstoppable momentum. Within an hour, the exposé hit trending. Within 2, industry professionals issued statements demanding investigations. By noon, Rob's brand managers had gone silent. His upcoming seminar was quietly postponed. Chloe locked her social media accounts. People began digging into past inconsistencies in Rob's messaging, his finances, his contradictory interviews. It was happening. My rebirth wasn't a burst of light. It was this, watching truth ripple outward, unstoppable, undeniable. At one point, I exhaled shakily, overwhelmed by the scale of it. Leo turned toward me, his expression softening in a way I had never seen before. "You did this," he said. I shook my head. "We did." He held my gaze for a long moment. There was something in his eyes, not pity, not triumph. Something more respectful, more quietly intense. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "you're not facing it alone." Those words should have scared me. But they didn't. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I woke the next morning with a strange sensation that the world had shifted overnight, tilted just a few degrees, enough to make everything familiar feel slightly off balance. My hearing, still hypersensitive, picked up the faint hum of traffic outside, each sound crisp and sharp, as if someone had wiped a foggy window clear. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel dread pressing behind my ribs. Something else had taken its place, a cautious, trembling hope. My phone vibrated before I could even sit up. Another vibration. Then another. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes, emails, messages, tagged posts, links. The exposé was spreading.
Fast.
I opened the first article at random. Rob's name filled the headline. Motivational icon's career in freefall after leaked audio reveals manipulation. My breath wavered. I knew this would happen, but seeing the words, the impact, felt surreal. People were quoting the recording, analyzing the tone of his voice, dissecting the cynical way he had spoken about sincerity as a script. What haunted me most was the sound of Chloe's laughter woven through the audio, like a taunt I'd heard too many times before. A small ache tugged inside me. Not for him, not anymore, but for the years I'd wasted believing I was building something meaningful. For the version of me who stayed up editing video clips until dawn so he could shine. For the woman who thought being the boring, technical mind was a weakness rather than the foundation of everything he stood on. Another buzz. This one from Leo. "You awake? It's happening. Check your email. Call me if you need grounding." Grounding. The word struck something warm inside me. I'd never had someone offer that before. People always expected me to be the anchor, the calm, the logic, the fixer. But Leo had seen something heavy in me and didn't flinch. He didn't try to lighten it. He simply offered stability. I didn't call him yet. I needed a moment to breathe in the quiet. By midday, Rob's empire had begun to crack in visible, public ways. His biggest sponsor suspended their contract, pending investigation. His seminar tour was postponed indefinitely. His carefully curated social media presence went silent except for a single, panicked statement written by a PR team clearly scrambling for footing. I read the statement twice. Not once did it mention me. Not once did it acknowledge the truth. He was still performing. Even now. The realization didn't sting anymore. It only confirmed what I already knew. He had never truly seen me. The next ping on my phone wasn't from the media. It was from an unknown number. A voicemail. I hesitated before pressing play. Rob's voice filled the room, shaky and angry beneath a forced calm. "Aisha, I know you're behind this. Or someone used you.
We can fix this if you talk to me."
I don't deserve this. I exhaled slowly, my pulse steady. For once, his voice didn't fill me with doubt or guilt. It sounded small, unanchored, unmasked. And I knew, with absolute clarity, that I wasn't responsible for his collapse. He had built his tower on lies. I had only pulled back a curtain. My phone rang again, Leo this time. I picked up. "You okay?" he asked, voice softer than usual. With Leo, softness was deliberate, not habitual. "I think so," I whispered. "It's a lot. I know. But it's also truth. Truth makes noise at first, then it makes space." His words settled over me like warm fabric. I realized I was smiling without meaning to. "Can you come by the studio?" he asked. "There's something I want you to see." I hesitated, but curiosity tugged stronger. When I arrived, Leo was editing something on the console, a clean, minimalist recording space so different from Rob's flashy chaos. He turned as I entered, expression unreadable in the low light. "I pulled up your old audio files," he said. "Your tutorials, your solo episodes. You had a voice long before him. It's time you hear it again." He pressed play before I could protest. My own voice filled the room. Clear, calm, precise. I felt a ripple of emotion rise in my chest, unexpected and overwhelming. I hadn't listened to myself in years. I barely recognized the confidence tucked between the breaths. Leo watched me carefully, not intruding, simply witnessing. Something inside me cracked, not with pain, but with release. I wasn't rebuilding from ruins. I was uncovering what I'd buried. For the first time, I allowed myself to lean just slightly toward someone else's certainty. Leo didn't touch me, but the air between us changed. Quiet, charged, respectful. Not romantic, not yet, but a promise of something grounded, earned, and real.
A foundation we might build on.
Together. The next few days unfolded like watching a storm dismantle a landscape I once thought was permanent. Every morning, my notifications fed me a new wave of consequences. Contracts freezing, partners distancing themselves from Rob, podcasts inviting experts to analyze the psychology behind his downfall. It should have felt like vindication. And in a distant, detached way, it did. But mostly, it felt like standing in the aftermath of a disaster I hadn't planned to witness from the front row. My hearing had settled into something unusual, but manageable. Sounds came layered now, more textured, more revealing. I could hear tension in voices, hesitation in breaths, sincerity in pauses. It wasn't superhuman, just sharpened. A reminder of the silence I'd endured and the clarity that followed. By the third morning, I knew I needed fresh air. Something untainted by screens and voices and commentary. I left my apartment early, walking through the quiet streets toward the river. The city felt almost tender at dawn. Less performance, more truth. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, coffee warming my hands. The river carried the early light in soft ripples. I breathed in deeply, letting the calmness settle the parts of me still vibrating with leftover adrenaline. My phone buzzed. I didn't check it. For the first time in years, I let messages arrive without feeling obligated to shape myself around them. When I finally looked, it wasn't media chaos, it was Leo. Studio at noon? New idea. Bring nothing but yourself. The message was simple, but something about the phrasing made warmth bloom in my chest. He never demanded. He offered. He always gave me space to choose. I walked to the studio slowly, letting the city sounds gather around me, footsteps, murmured conversations, a distant dog bark. None of it overwhelmed me. It felt grounding, like proof that I was still here, standing on my own foundation. Leo greeted me with a nod, hands in his pockets, expression serious, but not tense. His studio was bright today, sunlight cutting across the floorboards. It smelled faintly of cedar and espresso, cleaner, warmer than any space tied to my old life. I've been thinking, he said, motioning for me to sit. You've spent years building platforms for other people's voices. And you're better at it than they ever realized. But you've never had your own. I frowned slightly. I'm not the on-air type. You were, he said quietly. And you can be again. If you want.
He slid a folder toward me.
Inside were mock-ups, branding ideas, concept statements, potential names. Not flashy. Not performative.
Honest. Clean.
Built around integrity, transparency, and thoughtful storytelling. Not a motivational empire. Not a hollow brand. Something real. My throat thickened. You made this. I whispered. I drafted it, he corrected. But it's yours. Or it can be. You decide the direction. I traced the edges of the papers, absorbing the care behind them. No manipulation. No agenda. Just possibility. I don't know if I'm ready for something big, I admitted. This isn't big, he said gently. Not yet. It's just a seed. And seeds only grow if you're the one tending them. The way he said it, calm, respectful, without pressing, made my chest tighten. I had spent so long being pushed, shaped, and used without realizing it. Leo offered the opposite, a space where I could choose my pace. He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable but warm around the edges. You don't have to decide today, he added. Rebuilding isn't about speed. My eyes stung, and I blinked hard. Rebuilding. Not recovering from him. Rebuilding me. I took a slow breath. Can we start small? A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Small is my favorite place to start. He showed me a simple recording setup, just a clean mic, soft lighting, and a blank script page. No production pressure. No expectations. Just a quiet room and my voice. He stepped back, giving me space. Not just physically, emotionally, too. I sat before the mic, hands trembling slightly. The silence stretched, warm and patient. When I finally spoke, my voice emerged steady, richer than I remembered. "Hi," I said softly. "My name is Aisha, and I'm learning to hear my life again." Leo didn't move, but I felt his quiet encouragement behind me like a steady pulse. For the first time, I wasn't recording for someone else. I wasn't shaping a narrative I didn't believe in. I was simply speaking. Truthfully. Honestly. Finally. The mic captured every breath, every hesitation, every piece of me I'd hidden for too long. When I finished, Leo didn't clap or praise. He just met my eyes with calm certainty. That, he said, was real. And real is rare. I felt something bloom inside me. A quiet, steady light. Not revenge. Not triumph. Rebirth. And I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I never expected that the end of Rob's deceit would feel this calm. Not triumphant. Not explosive. Just a quiet settling inside me. Like dust after a storm finally falling back to the ground. For weeks I had been living in emotional static. Betrayal. Humiliation. Anger. Exhaustion. But now, after the exposé had taken over every platform, after Rob's apologies flooded the internet with his trademark fake sincerity, there was a silence growing in me again. This time, it wasn't frightening. It was clarity. I sat in Leo's office, watching sunlight spill across the floor like something carefully placed there for effect. He wasn't flashy. His space didn't scream guru, didn't pretend to inspire transformation. It simply was practical and grounded like him. Papers, headphones, post-its, a half-finished green tea. It felt more real than anything I had lived through with Rob in the past 3 years. When Leo finished another round of interviews, each reporter asking him about the anonymous audio engineer who exposed the motivational fraud, he leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't performing confidence. He simply existed in it. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "you didn't have to come here today. You've already done more than enough." I looked at the waveform on his screen, the final compiled version of the exposé. "I needed to hear the ending," I answered. "For myself." He nodded, understanding something I didn't have to explain. That was the strange thing about Leo. I never had to translate myself. He listened as if listening was an instinct. I leaned back, letting my thoughts settle. My hearing had stabilized over the past weeks, still sharp, still fragile, but no longer overwhelming. Dishonesty still struck me like a crack in glass, sharp and unmistakable. But in spaces like this, where the air carried no false tone, I felt safe. Maybe for the first time in years. "I keep thinking about how everything started," I murmured. "If that technical failure hadn't happened, I would never have heard what Rob and Chloe really thought." "That failure was the beginning of your freedom," Leo replied. "Sometimes rebirth isn't gentle." He said it casually, but it landed in me like truth. My old life had shattered. My trust, my role in Rob's company, the narrative I had written for myself. I had thought I was the quiet, reliable partner behind a charismatic leader. In reality, I was the engine behind his performance. And he had never intended to let me step out of the shadows. Now I wasn't in anyone's shadow. Leo stood and crossed the room to the window, looking out at the city. "The industry needed someone like you," he said. "Someone who doesn't trade on image. Someone who still believes in substance." I watched him for a moment, noticing the unpretentious way he existed in the world. I had spent years with someone who lived for applause. Leo lived for the work. "We make a good team," I said quietly. He turned back, a small, warm smile forming. "We do." There was a pause, not tense, not charged, just honest. A space where something new could breathe. I realized then that the noise inside me, the static of betrayal, the painful sharpness of dishonesty, had quieted in his presence. Maybe my hearing was adapting again. Or maybe I was finally letting myself step into a life built on clear frequencies. I don't know what comes next, I admitted. For the first time, I'm not planning everything. That's okay, he said, stepping closer. Not imposing. Not assuming. Simply offering presence. You don't have to rush. We can build things slowly. Professionally, personally, however you want. His voice carried no pressure, just sincerity, real sincerity, not the script Rob hated repeating. And there, in that simple, gentle honesty, something inside me finally softened. When Leo leaned in, slowly, giving me enough space to move away if I wanted, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel dizzy. I didn't feel like the world was tilting. It was quiet.
Clear.
Just a brief, tender kiss, nothing dramatic or sweeping, but a symbolic closure to one story and the beginning of another. A reminder that rebirth didn't have to be loud. When we pulled back, Leo smiled softly. A new chapter? I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in me. A new frequency, I corrected. And for the first time since the day everything shattered, I felt perfectly tuned.